again, when we're starting to say, Russia, you're war criminals, you're breaking the rules of war, you gotta be a little careful because very quick they can be like, well, so are they? And everyone's going to be like, oh, well, you have to be careful when you say a country is breaking the rules of war. The rules of war can be very misconstrued, and we're going to use Russia versus Ukraine as a topic. The main reason being because we are right now seeing in real time rules of war being broken on both sides. I'm just going to be honest. I support Ukraine. I am totally against any of this happening. Russia should have never invaded Ukraine. But I'm going to show you why, when you look at the rules of war, how general they are or how specific they are, militaries can use that in their advantage, and then they can say, hey, if they're breaking the rules of war, why is it a problem if we do? And Russia can really do that to Ukraine because of the use of Molotov cocktails. Now, Molotov cocktails, pretty simple. It's a breakable device that has fuel in it, and also you put a rag on top of it with a heat element, and then that sparks, explodes. You can take out vehicles, you can take out personnel. But here's why a Molotov cocktail actually might work against Ukraine, put them in the war crimes category, and Russia now has justification for saying they're breaking war crimes. Don't yell at us for breaking war crimes because they're doing it too. That's unfortunately what war crimes do. So today we're going to be actually citing the rules of war, or the International Humanitarian Law. They are a set of international rules that set out what can and cannot be done during an armed conflict. Sounds great, right? But let's look more into it. The main purpose of international humanitarian law, or the IHL, is to maintain some humanity in armed conflicts, saving lives and reducing suffering. Reducing suffering. I want you guys to remember that. Okay. What are Molotov cocktails made out of? Typically breakaway material, typically glass. Okay, glass material is actually a really big issue in the humanitarian laws, and we're actually going to see why. In fact, back in World War II, there used to be glass mines, and they got rid of it because when these glass mines exploded, you couldn't detect them in the X-rays, and then they defined that as way too cruel. And again, these humanitarian laws, they try to prevent anything cruel or any sort of suffering. And now let's look at this. That the use of any weapon whose effects is to injure by fragments that in the human body escape detection by X-rays as a means of warfare is prohibited. So Ukraine has their own law stating you cannot injure by fragments that in the human body escape detection by X-rays. What are Molotov cocktails made out of? They're made out of glass. So this is a very big issue because, again, Russia can say, Ukraine is breaking their own rules of war, so why are you guys giving us a bunch of crap? Again, I do not support Russia attacking or invading Ukraine, but we have to make sure we are looking at how rules of war can be misconstrued and how your enemy can be like, they're doing it, so I'm going to do it too. This is very important to realize throughout all of military history because this has always been done by every military. But let's look at even more laws that Ukraine kind of set themselves up for. Incendiary weapons. Molotov cocktails are incendiary weapons, and so let's look at this. Incendiary weapons directed against the civilian population or civilian objects as well as forest or other kinds of plant cover, unless the use of such weapons is covered by cases indicated in the primary requirements of Protocol 3 and the 1980 Convention of Certain Conventional Weapons. The manual further states, if a combatant is conducted in the forest, it is necessary to take into account the probability of forest fires that are likely to endanger persons and objects protected by international humanitarian law. Now, if a Molotov cocktail sets fire to a forest or sets a tree on fire, they are technically war criminals doing war crimes, and this is why, again, it's important to see Ukraine technically may or may not actually be in the war crimes category. Not saying they are, but I am saying Russia can literally be like, look what they're doing. Just because we're doing bad things too, they're also doing bad things. Again, I think it's super important to be very subjective on all of this. I do not support war. I was a former soldier. There are times where you have to fight the enemy, but right now, unfortunately, Ukraine is trying to defend themselves and doing anything they can, trying to equip their people with Molotov cocktails because they are effective and they are scary. But again, when we're starting to say, Russia, you're war criminals, you're breaking the rules of war, you got to be a little careful because very quick they can be like, well, so are they? And everyone's going to be like, oh, well, this is a little confusing. But now you know, war crimes, The rules of war are very general, very specific, and we have to be careful when we point the finger and say, you're breaking war crimes, you're doing war crimes, because sometimes who we think is not doing the wrong thing, they might be doing the wrong thing as well. But unfortunately, this is the battlefield, this is the rules of war. War is hell, war is the lowest denominator of any human existence, and I hope this all ends soon.